All right, everybody, welcome to the next episode of the Living in Southern Maryland podcast. Today, I got Scott Budden of Orchard Point Oysters. Thanks for coming on, Scott. Why don't you give us an overview of what Orchard Point Oysters is?
Sure. Thanks for having us, Rob. So Orchard Point Oyster Company is an oyster farm and seafood dealer located on Maryland's Eastern Shore. And we've been farming oysters since June of 2015. So I think this will be our ninth growing season. So almost a whole decade. It's kind of crazy to think that it's gone by like that. But yeah, we started after a several year process getting a lease, our first lease in Chester River in 15. And fast forward, we merged companies in 18 with some other individuals, Brian and Hal, that were farming in the Eastern Bay or just getting started, and that allowed the company to expand its footprint to more southerly waters, to go south of Kent Island and the Eastern Bay. And we've grown pretty steadily since then. Obviously, 20 and 21 with the pandemic didn't really help our cause there, but we've been able to scale the farm kind of organically since then. And I think last year in 2022, I think we only sold, we're close. It was like 950,000 or something was off the farm. So we're like a medium to medium large size farm in the state, I would say, as far as it's considered intensive oyster farming. So it's all in gear. I think we're kind of like a medium to medium large size farm there. Yeah.
That's awesome. And so I'm a little bit fanboying too, because I did some oyster stuff on social media before, and Orchard Point were one of the first oysters that I actually got for that oyster content, where I was trying different oysters, and Scott and the Instagram and all that kind of stuff were amazing and pushing that stuff out. But I got to tell you, it was like the easiest experience ever to order from you guys compared to anyone else, just because it literally was just a few clicks and they were at my door completely packaged and ready to roll, which was awesome. So yeah, I can see why you're going up to 950 K in sales. That's, you make it easy for anyone that wants farm raised oysters. I mean, that's an awesome thing. So we've been talking about oyster farming. What's the process look like for you guys when you farm oysters? Are they on the bottom? Do you have floats? What is that process actually like?
Sure. So we practice what we call intensive farming. And I think the reason is that it's intense kind of work. There's extensive, which I think means more like external. So you're going to be broadcasting your oysters on the bottom, which is more a traditional way of farming them. But with intensive culture, we actually, get our oyster seed every spring, every 2 weeks, and you have to grade them there to separate the fast growers to get them out into open water faster. You don't want to hold those guys back. And you also don't want to have the hungry oysters, so to speak, taking food from the less hungry oysters. So you're constantly, culling out the cream of the crop, so to speak, from the middle meat of the crop, and then the slower runts. So you have to do that maybe 5 to 6 times in the nursery, if not more. And then open water might get touched 2 or 3 times in floats. And you have to dump the bags out, clean the oysters, clean the bags, run them through a tumbling system, which is like a giant rock tumbler made out of aluminum, and it actually has holes punched the whole way down, so it's sorting them according to if they retain on those hole sizes. So they're falling through using gravity, and you're basically again sorting out the fast growers from slow growers, and then the fast growers get transported down Eastern Bay, and the small ones stay back in the floats to kind of continue to get shaped. So it's a lot of touches, and each oyster might get touched 20, 30 times or so before it hits your plate. So very, very labor intense process.
That's wild. I didn't realize. And so I'm kind of familiar with oyster farming myself. I've been around a few oyster farms, and I can remember I used to fish on St. Jerome's Creek, and Circle C oyster was big back in 2005-ish. And I remember going to their operations and some of the upwellers and stuff like that I saw. But it's crazy how much of a process it is to get that single oyster to your plate. And I'm sure that's, because farm raised oysters normally are a little bit more than wild caught oysters. And when you have that much man hours into it, it makes sense why they would be. You're putting a lot of effort into that. How do you learn that stuff? Were there resources out there for you guys to learn from, or is this kind of like MacGyver? You've kind of figured it out as you went along?
I I'd say in the beginning it was a bit of trial and error, and I still think now it's a lot of trial and error. But there's certain other farmers that were established in the state that were, somewhat willing and open to kind of show you the ropes, and if you're willing to put in a day of work or half day of work, they'd let you come to their farm and do that sort of thing, which is kind of crazy when you think about it because they're training their future competition. But yeah, that was a big help in the beginning, and then University of Maryland Extension has a lot of grower resources, so trying to take advantage of that. But at some point, you have to go from it being theory and academic to, all right, let's try it. Let's put some oysters in the water and see what happens. And I think with us, we did do it like kind of on a hobby scale off of a pier for a while, like a lot of people do, just to see what it entails. And that's a good way to cut your teeth, but it does not mimic the amount of work and headache that occurs when you're doing it at scale. So it was one of those things where you just kind of jump off the cliff and you build the airplane on your way. In the beginning, it was a lot of DIY on equipment, and so I didn't have a lot of resources at first. And then as it kind of scales and you're actually selling some oysters, because it takes about 18 months to sell your first oyster, then you can start to invest in better stuff.
So then you just said it takes 18 months to sell the oysters. So we're only talking really about, and not even just 18 months, but we're really only talking about the growing side of it. You got to sell these, you got to get these to market. You had to figure out that side of it too. So like, where do you primarily sell Orchard Point oysters? I know I got them online, and anyone that's listening right now, 100%, if you want oysters delivered to your door, by far the easiest process. I mean, that was so simple to go onto your website, click on it, they were there. And like I said before, like I can't speak highly enough. Not a single one was dead. Not a single one felt, like they've been dehydrated, dried out kind of thing, like a hollow shell. Like it was by far the best online oyster experience that I've had. And I've ordered now from 20 different farms at least, and the way they were packaged, how heavy they were, then we got here, and you are right in my backyard. You're 2 hours away from me, but still, I don't doubt that they would have lasted 2 or 3 more days just the way they were. But going back, one way to get your oysters is online. What are the other ways that you sell your oysters?
Sure. So believe it or not, before the pandemic, we actually did zero retail sales. It was all 100% restaurants and distributors. So when we first started out, it was direct to chef, because I had some chef connections through family in the DMV area. So that was kind of like an easy start, so to speak, get in some good places and then go from there. But once you scale to a certain point, there's only so many restaurants that you can service yourself, just because of so many hours in the day and delivering schedules and routes. And on top of that, you still have to farm and in the beginning do your own financials and all that. So it's a balance of spending time on the farm and the product and getting the quality nice, maintaining that, building new accounts, and then saying, okay, well, at some point we're going to have enough good oysters that we need to sell to distributors and wholesalers, especially outside this region. So anything outside of like the DMV, Philadelphia area, we're going through wholesalers, regional partners. So we'll put the oysters in boxes and they'll go on pallets, they'll go in refrigerated trucks, and they'll go as far south as Orlando, as far west as Denver, up to out to Ohio, places like that. And that's how you move. It's how you start to move some volume. Now you don't get the same prices you get from selling direct to chefs, but outside of these markets, we're not like we don't own trucking companies and distribution hubs. So we really rely on those partners, especially outside the area, to distribute the product and maintain the relationships. And it's kind of nice to be able to put 20 boxes or 100 boxes, whatever the number is, depending on supply, on a truck, and then it's kind of out of your hands. You can go back to farming, you go back to doing more strategic things. But we still do a lot of direct to chef sales around the area. And then when the pandemic hit, sales went to zero. I think within 2 weeks, because the state had shut down and it was starting to become more of a national thing too. So we had to figure out like how the heck do we stay afloat, because the oysters were still growing. They didn't know there was a human born pandemic going on, and that there was not any demand anymore. So it was like, do you stop tending to the farm and just let the quality, go crap and, create a huge headache down the road with trying to get through the oysters? Or do you, still pay to have the farm worked and figure out something else? So I think within 2 weeks, Rob, we figured out how to cold ship oysters. We were almost finished with the website anyway, but that kind of we stepped on the gas on that one because we need some kind of interface to the public. So our designer, she did a great job building out the store within like 2 weeks, and then we did trial and error on shipping stuff. We would send oysters. This was in the spring, so it wasn't as hot, but we'd send them Chicago, Seattle, places like that, and to friends that we could trust, and see if they would hold temperature for 48 hours. And just did that until we figured out the right ratio of gel packs and packaging and all that. And so yeah, that was it was born of necessity, but it's something that we've continued post pandemic. And it sounds like you surely get around with these online farms in terms of trying things. And we offer 2-day ground ship to the entire East Coast, mostly, for the most part. This is really rural area, and then as far west as like the Midwest, we can get there 2 days ground. It's amazing how far you can go on with ground shipping. And then if people want it outside of that range, we offer overnight shipping, that sort of thing. We have an account with UPS or through a third party, so it helps with the shipping costs a little bit. But yeah, we're not going to wood. We're fairly confident they're going to arrive, fresh, a day or two out of the water, alive, and at temperature, safe to eat in the summer. So yeah, it's been fun.
So I get lots of comments and questions or people just saying, hey, I used to live in Southern Maryland and I miss, crabs, or I miss oysters. I can say right now, if you missed the Chesapeake Bay oysters, and it's got a little bit, I think, better flavor than just wild caught, but if you miss them, order them. Like, you can, it's a simple process to get them from Orchard Point. I would highly recommend that. So if you're one of those people that leave those comments wondering, how I can get some oysters shipped for me, we'll put that link down below so they can do that, because it's well worth it. All right. So one of the things that I've noticed when I'm buying oysters, especially farm raised oysters, is they're a little bit more expensive, but I also noticed too that they taste a lot better too. And I think it's worth that extra, few bucks per dozen or something like that. And especially your oysters, I use the word umami for them because they have a certain flavor to them that I haven't had in any Chesapeake Bay oyster. I've had them in the Maine oysters, kind of had that same taste, a good sweet balance of sweet and salt. So what do you think is you don't have to give us any proprietary secrets, but what's the secret? Because there's other oysters growing in the Chester River. It's not like it's just your oysters. There's wild oysters and other oysters. What makes it so your farm raised Orchard Point oysters are so unique with flavor?
Yeah, great question, Rob. I think, a lot of ways, oysters are like wine. So folks that are familiar with the wine industry understand the concept of terroir, and that the oyster is going to taste reflective of the region it's grown in. And we're not to the point as an industry where we've got palliations and this is a certain denomination and category and class. We don't have Grand Cru oysters and stuff like that. But I think it's both method and location. So the oysters method also plays a role. To your point about there being other oysters in the Chester and Eastern Bay, absolutely. There's wild oysters, there's other farms. I think I'll start with the place. The Chester has a lot of nutrients in it. It's primarily surrounded by agricultural farms, and actually where our main grout site is, it's right off of a federal wildlife refuge. So there's actually no homes, there's no industry. At the most, there will be farm fields. So there's just a constant supply of that rich sun-fed algae that they're experiencing, and since we keep them at the top of the water column, they're constantly exposed to that. So I think it builds up the glycogen stores. And then we move them southeastern Bay. The way that the watershed there is shaped, it's almost like a salt funnel, because in the Bay, saltier water, colder water, denser water tends to move in a northeasterly direction. That's why, at the same latitude, eastern shore versus western shore, the eastern shore is going to be slightly saltier because of that, and it has to do with the tides and the moon and the way that.
That's crazy. I never knew that. Never knew that.
Yeah, it's interesting. You have to go down to southern Maryland. Excuse me. You have to go down to southern Maryland to your neck of the woods to get similar salinity as say we get in the mid Bay on the eastern shore. So the way again Eastern Bay is shaped, it's it's kind of just catching a lot of that colder, denser, saltier water, and it's a deeper bay with a good amount of upwelling with that cold, denser water at the surface. So I think it's just a unique geography between that lower salinity, sweeter water in Chester, and then moving it down and finishing it in that, probably deeper, colder water, saltier water of Eastern Bay. And that's on the location side. Now, the method, I think, also informs taste because they're constantly in motion in surface floats, at least the classics and the ones you eat raw. It's like constantly doing like a core workout for the oysters. Because they're not able to always be open and feeding. Like if they're on the bottom, kind of passively feeding as they are, that abductor muscle, that muscle that holds the two shells, the top and bottom shells together, isn't being that exercised. If they're, say, a wild oyster on a reef, and they have to close up when there's predators, that kind of thing. So that's good for that. But because they're constantly being moved or rocked about and hitting each other and banging into each other in the floats, they're doing this core workout where they have close and release, close. So what it does is it exercises that muscle, just like if you were to go to the gym, hit the gym. It's going to make that muscle bigger and more plump, more toned. And I think that might have something to do with when you're eating them. You get that firmness of that muscle that you wouldn't get. And I think that helps with the flavor. It's almost like when you eat a scallop, or you eat a scallop, most of the time you're eating just that muscle. So we notice a lot when we shuck them out. A lot of times that muscle is, a good portion of the whole meat of the oyster. So most people eat that. I don't know about you, Rob. Most people eat them front to back. So your first bite's going to be into that firmer, almost scallopy kind of muscle, and then you'll work your way back. Then you get the stomach. When you bite into that, that's what's going to release that sweetness, that almost that glycogen bomb that you get from being in those two watersheds. So it's a bit of both. I think the interplay, and it's taken a lot of trial and error to figure that out and justify moving tons of rocks between two tributaries, because that's an extra step that we do that we don't necessarily have to.
So another question I got for you on to the next thing here is, I hear you talking about eating them in the spring and the summer. I'm guessing, I know wild caught season ends March 31st-ish. Is there a season for farm raised, or is that an all year round thing?
So for farm raised oysters, at least in the Chesapeake Bay, it is a year round process. So they're growing mostly from the spring through the holidays. But as far as a harvest and the way our farm runs, I think a lot of farms in the state and up and down the East Coast, is that you're able to harvest actually year round. So we'll do 3 harvests a week, 52 weeks a year is ideally what we'll try to aim for. So it's a lot of harvests that we bring in oysters, but by doing it that way, we can ensure that the customers are getting fresh product as fresh as possible. And it still makes sense on our end logistically. But yeah, the beauty of, I guess, farmed oysters is that a couple things. One, the majority of farmed oysters, like 90+%, are actually triplet oysters. So they're like a seedless watermelon or a seedless grape. They've been bred selectively to take away the reproductive process, which basically the big thing back with wild oysters before refrigeration concerns came into play, was that you wouldn't want to eat an oyster that was reproducing. It's just weak and watery to a degree. If it's like July, early August, when they're doing their thing, that texture is just not there. So when you talk about chewing it, maybe somebody that doesn't chew wouldn't be able to tell the difference, but you can just tell by shucking one out if it's spawned out, as we say. It's just there's not much there as far as the meat quality. So by creating a sterile oyster, you don't experience that even when the water gets warmer. They're going to devote all their energy into growing. So it increases the meat quality, but it also allows the animal to devote itself 100% to growth. So that's where you get this really rapid growth. So it takes about 18 months where we are to get something to market, whereas in the same waters, a wild oyster would take about 3 years. So it cuts that down about 50%. And then, another thing, since the advent of modern refrigeration and Freon and cooling systems and all that, is that we're able to, practice high quality of food safety in the summer and the warmer months. So that's another concern from a public health perspective. Traditionally, why the public fishery isn't open in the summers, you pull these things out, they're sitting in the back of somebody's truck, it's in a parking lot, it's 100 degrees, sun's baking down. not the greatest thing for seafood, and particularly with filter feeders that you know have the natural water in them. You get things like bacteria and viruses that can multiply very quickly under warm conditions. So by following federal guidelines, actually Maryland's stricter than the federal guidelines under FDA. We have to get everything down by a certain time and a certain temperature in the summertime. They're pretty strict about it, and we're very diligent about it. We have to keep cooling logs every time we pull oysters from the water in the summer. And the idea is that you get things, in this case oysters, down to temp quickly using modern available things. And I see now they have like coolers and they have AC coolers now. You can just take around portable. So the idea that things can have an unbroken cold chain, which is what we strive for. So we have a refrigerated van back up to the pier. As soon as they're out of the water and washed, they go right in the van. So they're right away at 50 degrees or less. And then they come into a packing room at 50 degrees while they're packed and counted. And then they go into a walk-in at 38. And then anytime they go out, they're either going right back in that van or they're going out of the truck at 45. So you really, in theory, in practice too, we're able to maintain that unbroken cold chain. If they're going shipped out to someone like yourself and through UPS mail, we'll literally pack them in the walk-in with ice packs and put it in, it's a nice sealed, reflective packaging, and we'll keep it there right up until I think 5 o'clock when UPS rolls out from our area, and if it's going the next day or 2 day, we'll keep it in that walk-in at 38, right at that last second, and then bam, it's out the door and goes right to the shippers. So yeah, we really try to go beyond what we're probably required to do by the state and the feds, but last thing anybody wants in this industry is to make anybody sick. So
Yeah.
We're especially eating some raw. So we're probably too anal about it, but
No, and like we talked about earlier, like kind of what I wondered what makes Orchard Point oysters so great. It sounds like it's all the little stuff that you're doing that's making it great, whether it's just the handling of them, getting from boat, to the consumer, or it's just going the extra mile to like the fact that you send it to different people to test out the cold storage, the fact that you're, trying different combinations of waterways and stuff like that. Like it's your curiosity and your desire to get it right that seems like that it's making such a great product. And I can't speak highly enough about how great the farm raised oysters are. Well, Scott, I appreciate you coming on. Why don't you tell us the best place to get in touch with you guys, whether it be Instagram or website? Like how do you want people to reach out to you if they want to get some oysters?
Sure. So, we try to be big on the socials. I can do always a better job with that. But our Instagram handle is Orchard Point Oysters, all one word, no symbols. You can find us on Facebook, same thing, Orchard Point Oysters. And then our website's pretty easy. There's a theme, orchardpointoysters.com. There's a shop there, shop. You just click on that. If you want to look at what products we offer, we do the cold shipping of oysters, but we also do Maryland crab meat as well. We do that to folks that are in the area or outside of the area that, like you said, yearn for the Maryland crab and they can't get it wherever they are. So I think we shipped out to somewhere far flung last week, 2 pounds of it somewhere to someone outside the area. So we do that. We got other seafood too online. Everything we do right now is to order. So that helps with our inventory management, but it also ensures freshness. So like our retail cutoff is Wednesday at noon. And the idea behind that is that we want to give people enough time to get closer to the weekend to maybe know what their plans are. But they're going to be pulled first thing Thursday morning, and you're going to get them a lot of times local pickup or cold ship. You're going to get them Friday. So they're really out of the water less than 24 hours sometimes. And that ensures that you're getting the best product possible. And whenever we don't, move out, goes back in the water and gets a chance to, recondition itself. But we have other things, wild caught Gulf shrimp, Atlantic hard clams, stuff like that. So if people want to peruse the various seafood options we have, the website's a great place to do it. And we're in the process of maybe looking at a brick and mortar space down here in Kent Island for some additional seafood retail. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, hopefully, fingers crossed, we can build that out. So.
That's awesome. That's needed down there too. I feel like that would do well. Like that That would be awesome to see. So I'll put the links down for anyone listening. I'll put the links down in the description too for the website, for Instagram and Facebook. And I appreciate you coming on today, Scott. And hopefully I'll be getting some more oysters here soon.
We appreciate it, Rob. Your promotion and your honest reviews, I think, are keeping people honest. So thank you.
You're welcome.